Okay, good afternoon, pilot teachers, and good afternoon, students. Thank you. Sit down. Okay, today what we'll try to do is we'll continue on with our work on climate, but we'll try to at least complete the temperate climates today so that in our next lesson we can move on to the last grouping, and that is looking at the polar climates. Double check on what we have covered so far. We have completed information on, for the temperate climates, information on the warm, temperate, eastern maritime climate. And we also had time to look at the Mediterranean climate. Those were the two climates that comes together with the temperate group of climates that we had time to already look at in our last lesson. Today we are going to move on, and similar activities to what we have done on the climates of the tropical region and the two temperate climates. We'll do the same for the three temperate climates that are yet to be completed or covered. So the three temperate climates that we are going to cover in our lesson today will be the cool temperate western maritime, the cool temperate continental, and the cool temperate eastern continental type climate. Again, be reminded, we are going to look at location of these particular climates. We are going to look at some selected areas of the world by looking at the world map to show us those selected areas that experience this type of climates. And also we are going to look at characteristics, some of the main characteristics that distinguish those climates from the other climate types. And our task is going to be ensuring we are able to identify the latitudes of these different climates and also be able to make a list of different characteristics that distinguishes those different climates. So we move on now, and we'll move on with the temperate climates, looking at the cool temperate western maritime climate. Looking at what we have covered already so far, we have looked at the warm temperate eastern maritime climate. From our map on the monitor, you can see the selected areas that actually experience the warm temperate eastern maritime climate. That's the first of the temperate climates. The area here in United States, South America, South Africa, southern part of China and on the coast, and also the southeastern part of Australia and the North Island of New Zealand. The summary for the warm temperate eastern maritime climate, we have already looked at that in our last lesson. Then we also looked at the Mediterranean climate. The Mediterranean climate, as I've mentioned, are restricted to the area where the Mediterranean Sea is, and mainly on the western sides of continents between the latitudes 30 degrees to 45 in the north and 30 to 40 in the south. We also looked at the summary of the Mediterranean climate. One of the main points that was emphasized was the Mediterranean climates will have dry summers and wet winters. And that is actually distinctive from their climograph, where the dip on the climograph is you expect a high rainfall or a lot of rainfall. Where the bump on the climograph is you expect the least rainfall because of the fact that winters are wet, summers are dry. Okay, now we move on to the third of the temperate climates, and that is looking at the cool temperate western maritime climate. Information from the monitor, the introduction. Again, there is no need for you to copy every single word from that introduction. You can just pick up the main points and make note of the main points only. Regions with this type of climate, which is the cool temperate western maritime climate, they lie along the western sides of all land masses in the latitudes 40 degrees to 60 degrees north and south of the equator. These areas experience onshore westerly winds almost all the time. Remember, by the time we reach 30 degrees to 60 north and 30 to 60 to the south, the air masses, the horizontal air masses, would be mainly the westerly winds blowing. Between 0 to 30, north and south of the equator, we have the trade winds. By the time we reach 30 to 60, then the westerlies are effective or more common in those regions. Summers in those regions are warm rather than hot, and winters are cool to cold. The onshore westerlies in these regions, they bring moderate to heavy orographic rainfall, but cyclonic rainfall may also occur in these regions as air masses of different temperature come in contact with each other. You remember the 60-degree area whereby we have a subpolar low pressure belt in that area. That subpolar low pressure belt is created as a result of the cold air coming from the polar meeting up with the warm air coming from the tropics. And where they meet, the warm air is forced to rise, resulting in the creation of the low pressure belt in that area. Okay, so for the cyclonic rainfall that occurs around those areas, it will come about mainly as a result of the meeting of different air masses. That is the introduction then to the work on the cool temperate western maritime, which is the third of the temperate climates that we are making reference to. Okay, we move on. This time, let's look at some of the locations of the cool temperate western maritime climate. Perhaps you might, or you could also want to make a list of those areas, and you can list them into your exercise book. Okay, these regions, they will include the northwestern Europe. So we're looking at northwestern part of Europe, the countries found within the area that has been shaded in red. So one of the regions that experience this type of climate is northwestern Europe, this area here. The other area would be Western Canada. So we're looking at Canada that goes across, but the western side mainly of Canada, and also the adjacent areas to the northwest of USA. So United States here and the northwestern area in United States. So Western Canada and also northwestern part of USA. You have also southern Chile, the southern part of the country Chile that also experiences this type of climate. Tasmania in Australia that experiences the cool temperate western maritime climate, and also the South Island of New Zealand. So those would be some of the regions, according to our map there, that experiences this type of climate. Okay, we move on. This time to the summary, and I'm going to give you time then to make note of the summary. For this type of climate, if we're looking at the temperature, in summer the temperatures are warm, and in winter the temperatures are cool. Precipitation or rainfall is moderate to heavy, more than 700 millimeters of rain per annum. And here we're looking at rain occurs in all seasons. The important controls of this type of climate, the cool temperate western maritime climate, the moist onshore westerly maritime air in all seasons, bringing orographic rain to most parts of those selected areas that we have looked at. There is also some cyclonic rain that does occur as a result of the meeting of those two different air masses. Okay, I'll give you time now to make note of the summary. Okay, have you made note now of that information? Everyone? Okay, good. Then we'll move on. Let's look at a sample of a climograph for this type of climate, and the selected area is that of London in England. This type of climate, the cool temperate western maritime climate, is also known as the British type climate. So when we make reference to the British type climate, you are basically looking at the cool temperate western margin or western maritime climate. In some books, they may not tell you that it is the cool temperate western maritime, rather they might tell you the British type climate. So if they're making reference to the British type climate, then it is the same climate type that is mentioned. Look at the climograph of the selected area now. That's London in England. You can see the moderate rainfall right throughout the year. The onshore westerly winds bringing in perhaps rain in most of the seasons or right throughout the year. Rainfall is not as high as those that are in the tropical areas. The temperatures, because this is a climograph of the northern hemisphere, definitely the bump is in the middle month, because it is usually summer in the northern hemisphere in the middle months. And the dip is towards the end and the beginning months because of winter in those or in that hemisphere at that time of the year. But generally, this is a sample of what the climograph of a cool temperate western maritime climate would look like. Okay, we'll move on. This time, we are going to look at the cool temperate continental climate, and that is the fourth type of climate to do with the temperate climates. The word continental perhaps will give you an idea on the location of this type of climate. It is found within the cool temperate areas of the world, but it is perhaps more confined to the inland areas or the continental areas. When we look at maritime, it is mainly to do with the influence from the sea. And when we look at continental, we are looking at mainly distance away from the sea, further inland we are from the sea. Okay, now looking at the cool temperate continental climate. These are the drier interior climates of continents in the middle latitudes. An interesting and important point about this climate is that they are confined to the two northern hemisphere continents mainly. So when we're looking at the two northern hemisphere continents, the two are North America and Eurasia. So this particular climatic type is actually confined to the two northern hemisphere continents. Why? Because generally there is more land in the northern hemisphere than in the southern hemisphere. We note this type of climate is found in inland North America and Eurasia in the latitudes between 30 degrees to 55 degrees north approximately. So when we go over to looking at the map, you will find that the shaded areas, there is none in the southern hemisphere because of the fact that there is more land in the northern hemisphere than in the southern hemisphere. The important points for you to make note of from the maybe introduction will be the location mainly 30 to 55 degrees north approximately, and also the drier, confined to the two continents in the northern hemisphere, and these are mainly the drier interior climates of those two continents that we are making reference to. Okay, we'll move on. Looking at still on that climate, there are two basic features that distinguishes this type of climate. That is the cool temperate continental climate. And the two basic features are the fairly low precipitation, and the second one is the big seasonal range in temperature, which is the most extreme found in the settled areas of the world. So again, the two basic features that distinguishes this type of climate is one, the fairly low precipitation, and two, the big seasonal range in temperature. So if you look at the climograph of a cool temperate continental climate, you will find, because it is in the northern hemisphere, the temperature readings, there would be actually a big difference in terms of temperature range. The lowest temperature would be quite low, and the highest temperature a little bit higher, but the difference between the highest and lowest would be greater. Whereas if you are looking at the tropical region, you will find that there is very little variation between the highest and the lowest temperature. So when we talk about the seasonal range in temperature, you find that in such a climatic type, the seasonal range is very big. And you can also identify by looking at their climograph. Okay, now to the areas of the world which experiences this type of climate. So if you refer to the map, you will note that it is mainly confined to those continents, two continents in the northern hemisphere that we have mentioned. In North America, note interior away from the coast or the sea, and also in Eurasia. So it stretches from certain parts of Europe all the way to the interior part of Asia. So this type of climate is only confined to those two areas that we are making mention of. Okay, now to the summary of this type of climate. We look at the temperature for the summary. In summer, it is actually hot. In winter, cold to very cold. So if it is cold to very cold, then obviously the temperatures definitely go below freezing. So you expect to find temperatures such as minus 15, minus 20 degrees, etc., to also occur during the winter times. Precipitation, rainfall is light to moderate, and note rainfall is less than 700 millimeters per year. In terms of rainfall in the different seasons, there is a slight summer maximum. That means perhaps during the summer months, there might be a general increase in the amount of rain, but not very great, because one of the basic features that we have looked at is the fairly low distribution of rainfall. Controls for this type of climate, mainly the dry continental air masses, because of the fact that it is an interior type climate or continental type climate. And there is also some convection in summer, which also results in thunderstorms. I'll give you time then to make note of the summary. We finished? Okay, we move on. Finally, to the last climate for the temperate climates. But before we look at that, we look at a sample of the climograph of such a climate. And you can see there the fairly low rainfall throughout the year. And also note the big seasonal variation between the summer months and the winter months. So temperature, the lowest temperature is somewhere around maybe minus 13 degrees Celsius, and the summer temperature is about 21, 22 degrees Celsius. When we do subtract, we will find that there is a big temperature range. And that is one of the distinctive things that you can pick up from this type of climate. Okay, finally then to the last of the temperate grouping of climates, and that is the cool temperate eastern margin type climate or continental type climate. This type of climate is also known as the Laurentian type climate. So if they talk about the Laurentian type climate, we're making reference to the cool temperate eastern continental climate. Introduction to that particular type of climate. These climates are actually found on the eastern margins of large continents of the northern hemisphere in the latitude 35 degrees to 50 degrees to the north. Continental air masses, they influence these areas, accounting for the hot summers, the cold winters, and the large seasonal temperature range in those areas. In this way, the climate is similar to the continental interiors, but these areas have higher precipitation. When we looked at the cool temperate interior climates, one of the basic features that we looked at was the fact that it has low precipitation. Whereas for the cool temperate eastern continental type climates, they tend to have higher precipitation. Their location is about the same, about 35 to 50 degrees to the north, but mainly on the eastern sides of continents. The word here, eastern, should be able to help you with the location a little bit more easier. Similarly, the cool temperate continental should be able to help you with the location because it's interior type climate. The cool temperate, similar location, but it's more to the eastern side rather than the interior or the west. Location of this type of climates, or this type of climate, the cool temperate eastern continental or the Laurentian type climate. You find here Eastern China. We also have Korea. The country Korea experiences this type of climate. Northern island of Japan. The South Island of Japan experiences the warm temperate type climate. Here, the northern island of Japan experiences the cool temperate eastern continental type climate. We also have the northeastern part of USA and the adjacent southeastern part of Canada. So this time, this section here, this area of United States and Canada. Okay, so those would be some selected areas that experience this type of climate as shown by our map. Questions? Is there a question? No? Okay, finally then to the summary of this type of climate. For the cool temperate eastern continental type climate, temperature, summer is hot, winter is cold. Precipitation, moderate to heavy, more than 700 millimeters per year. Rain falls in all seasons in this type of climate. The controls, mainly cyclonic precipitation, and there is also conflict between the varied air masses. In other words, the meeting of the warm air and the cold air, where they come in contact, there is also a conflict resulting in one having to actually rise over the other, usually the hot or the warm air. I'll give you time then to make note of the summary, and that will also conclude our work on the temperate climates. 13. Are we finished? Okay, good. Okay, to summarize and to sum up what we have looked at, let's look at the climograph for the cool temperate eastern continental type climates. Again, very similar to the climate of the cool temperate continental, but look at the temperature readings in comparison. The temperatures here are not to the extremes of going down as far as negative 25 or 30, etc. It's about maybe between 0 to -5, the lowest temperature may actually fall to. The highest temperatures are still about 25, 26 degrees Celsius in the summer months. There is also a big difference between the highest and the lowest temperature, therefore the temperature range is also greatest. Look at the annual rainfall, more than 700 millimeters. The amount of rainfall is greater than those of the cool temperate continental type climate. Okay, with that information, that will also bring us to the end of our lesson. Before you go, let me give you some activities that I'd like you to actually work on so that it will help you with perhaps understanding a little bit more on what we have covered on the tropical climates and the temperate climates. The topic on climate is actually a difficult topic because there are a lot of things that we need to remember, especially characteristics. Do the following activities to help you. Number one, in your own words and into your exercise book, see if you can compare and differentiate between the different tropical climates and the different temperate climates that we have looked at. Okay, when you are differentiating, you note that there are 5 tropical climates that we have looked at and 5 temperate climates that we have looked at. So what you could do is you could pick up a pair of tropical climate and see if you can work out what is the difference between equatorial and savanna. What is the difference between monsoon and tropical deserts? What is the difference between equatorial and tropical deserts? That's what I am making reference to on differentiating between those different types of climates. Then you do the same for the temperate climates. What is the difference between a warm temperate eastern margin from a cool temperate western margin? Or what is the difference between a Mediterranean from a cool temperate eastern continental type climate? And if you can actually differentiate, then definitely you have understood what we have looked at on climates, location of climates, and also characteristics. Okay, and with that, class, if you can stand up now. To the pilot teachers, our keyword for lesson 129 is cool temperate. Good afternoon and thank you, students.